Hey guys, good morning. It's probably not morning for you. It's probably not morning when you're watching this, but it's morning for me. So, good morning. I have a little bit of time this morning, so I thought I'd film you guys kind of a real basic buyer's guide on the A70 Supra. Not the most comprehensive buyer's guide, but a few things that you should really look for, a few things to check, and a couple things to run from. With this information, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to make a good purchase and not burn your money. So let's get into this. Okay, we're going to use my Supra as, pretend this is the car you're buying. Also, assuming you have no information on the vehicle from the seller. So you're flying in blind kind of deal. What you need to look for. Number one, I'll say, and probably to the majority of people that go look at one of these cars, you're excited, you just want to buy it anyway, you want to have it, whatever. You commonly overlook a couple things, and this is one of them. So the spare tire, it's the lowest part of the vehicle. Water pools in here, it's notorious for rust. You'll find it's going to start here in kind of like a moon shape and kind of work its way around, and it may start on this side too by that drain plug. Don't know why, but Toyota left the plugs in the car there. If yours doesn't have any rust, just pull those plugs out. Any water that does find its way into the spare tire well will leave. Okay, that's number one. I don't think you can buy the spare tire as a cutout. So you'd have to find a donor vehicle. And, for a guy to cut this out, ship it to you, it'd probably be relatively expensive. Make sure there's no rust here. Not saying it can't be repaired, just saying it's expensive. The second thing is where your tool bag is. Just remove this little panel out of the way. You should be able to see the rear tire, or the rear wheel tub there. Make sure that's there, and it's metal. Same thing on this side. You can get in here, kind of reach your hand in there, and try to feel metal. I've seen Supras that friends have bought with rubber floor mats glued into there. And what they did on the other side is they took spray foam, like for sealing a house, spray foamed it, like block sanded it, and then painted it with bed liner or like rocker guard. So you had no idea until you take that rear panel off and you realize there's nothing there. Check that on both sides, make sure the wheel tubs are there. You can see them, you can have a good idea of if they're there or not without disassembling the whole rear interior. And another thing, stick your arm down in here and just make sure the tub's gonna come to about here. Just make sure it's all metal in there. You're gonna feel dirt. It's probably gonna be bugs. It's gonna be gross, but check it out. Also, get under here and just have a good look at everything after the rear wheels in terms of the floor pan. Rust is a big thing, okay? Probably number two on the list while you're here to look at is the rear subframe. Okay, don't be scared, get under there with a flashlight. Check around the rear pumpkin, or where the pumpkin of the diff mounts. That's where it's gonna crack first, on top of it, or the mounts themselves. Very uncommon to find just one leg of the subframe's cracked. But you can't buy them new anymore. So check it. They're expensive, they're big, they're bulky, expensive to ship. So definitely check that out. After the rearward rust and the subframe, belt moldings are a big thing. Okay? Pre-89, more so, they used ungalvanized metal behind the plastic. And wherever you see it bubble, there's corrosion behind that plastic. Very expensive. If you need one or two pieces, then it's not the worst thing in the world. But to find a good matching set, You know, pre-89, post-89, probably anywhere between $1,000 and $1,200 for a real nice set. So it's expensive. Belt molding's a big thing. Subframe's a big thing. Rust in the rear quarters is a real big thing. Same thing with the lower tub. Check all that. Be real thorough and diligent. You don't want to spend money on rust repair. It's expensive to do right, and that's money you could be spending making the car more your own. So the less you can spend on just, you know, bringing it back to life, the better. The next thing is these front mud flaps. There's a couple 10 mils under here, one here. Pull this thing off, have a look at where the fender mounts to the tub itself. It's very common for this area to become packed up with, you know, foliage and dirt, debris, stuff like that, especially if the car is lowered and these fender plastics aren't in there. So you can imagine with a bunch of leaves and dirt in here, when this gets wet, it holds moisture, and moisture rusts. So check that out. Both sides, boom, bada bing. Okay, moving on. Probably the most famous thing to look for on these is the head gasket. As you know, I'm sure. If you're looking at buying a Supra, an A70 Supra, chances are you already Googled it, you know it's notorious. So, a few things under here you can check. Again, assuming you have no information and the seller knows nothing. Okay, so there's two simple things you can check. One's the rad cap. Do it cold, please. Don't open this when it's hot. It even says, don't open when it's hot. You shouldn't see any milky looking stuff in there. And you want to see Toyota red long life antifreeze. You shouldn't see anything green in there. It should be Toyota. Regardless of the brand of coolant, it should not have anything milky in it. The second thing is unscrew your oil cap. You should see oil. You shouldn't see any condensation in there. You'll see condensation, it's gonna look white, it's gonna look milky. Unless you're buying this in the winter and it's been cold started a million times, you shouldn't see condensation in there, especially in a warm climate. That's how you can tell if you have any moisture or coolant mixing with the oil. You'll see it in there, you'll see it in here, and you will see it in the oil pan when you drain the oil. You don't want that. If you see anything milky related, like not even like, if you have your suspicions whatsoever, take a cam cover off, look at the head bolts. You can see them very, very clearly. Should be like one here, 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 and here. And you should see ARP on top of them. You should not see bare 10mm hex bolts. If you see bare 10mm hex bolts, those are the original head studs, or head bolts I should say. Chances are the head gasket hasn't been done. If it has been done, and the owner swears it's been done, they reuse the head bolts. They're a one-time use. I wouldn't recommend using them again. So they've cut corners there. Where else have they cut corners? That's a bargaining chip. If this hasn't been done properly, there's big money there. I'd probably say to do the head gasket properly in a 7M is going to cost you about $1,500. So head's got to come off, it's got to get decked. Clean up your block if you're doing it in the car, like really, really well. Lap the block, like it's got to be like a mirror almost, right? You should not feel anything. Drag your finger along it. You shouldn't catch anything. You know, ARP head studs, HKS, you know, stopper, gasket, whatever. You want to go cometic, doesn't really matter. Metal head gaskets, ARP studs, head's got to get decked. You might as well do the timing belt, might as well do the front seal and oil pump drive seal. You might as well do all that while it's apart, because it's apart. So if that hasn't been done, if you don't see ARPs, there's got to be some money there. If you do see ARPs, great. There's some merit to, you know, the fact that it may have been done. But still do your due diligence. Ask the questions. Look at as much as you can. Make sure it's been done. If you see nothing but coolant, nothing but oil, ARPs on the top, chances are it's been sorted. That's all you can ask for. Without taking the engine apart, you just don't know. So, with that being said, these engines can be prone to oil-related failures, primarily due to the volume of oil being restricted by a crush bent oil pickup tube and banjo fittings on it. Major restriction, and probably the second oversight with Toyota, first being the head gasket, second being the oil pickup tube, is a problem. So knowing that they're common to, rod bearing failures, when it's warm, bring it up on idle, probably north of 3,000 RPM and back down a few times. Listen for any rotational noise. If you don't see any rotational noise, it has evidence of the head gasket done. I'd say it's pretty, use your best judgment, but it's a pretty sound deal. Next thing probably would be a few things I'd run from. So you got your basics. You check the chassis for rust, all the expensive repairs, head gasket, no rotating noise, transmission, this and that, everything else is good. You know how to buy a used vehicle. If you don't, take somebody with you. They'll make sure the general aspects of it are well sorted. And you just look at these key points here. A couple things to run from. Number one is a Shimmed Wastegate. So there's a factory turbo on this. If there's no turbo, you don't have to worry about this. But if it's GTE and there's no boost controller, take a look at the wastegate. There'll be like a puck mounted like right here with a little rod on it going to the internal wastegate in the exhaust housing. So that thing's vacuum. It sees boost from the turbo. So if you see washers stacked behind that, just run away from the vehicle. If the previous owner is too frugal to spend the money on a manual boost controller, even if you want to go real cheap, for 10 bucks from eBay or 60 bucks for a Turbo Smart one or whatever, if they're too cheap to spend the 60 bucks and stacked washers behind there, then they're too cheap to take care of a lot of other aspects of this vehicle. That's a big indicator to me that it's been run on a tight budget. Pay attention there. The second thing I'd run away from, honestly, would be a stripped interior. If the guy tried to go, full race car, chances are it's been driven relatively hard, right? So, that's something to look for. It's different if you know you're buying one with the intention to race, but if you want to street drive something, you want it to hold some value, it's got to have an interior. And that's all there is. If there's no interior, I'd ask a lot more questions unless your intent is to track the vehicle, race the vehicle competitively, whatever. If you want a street car, it's got to have an interior, not a street car pretending to be a race car. They don't really jive. So, interior, make sure it's got one. If it doesn't, run away, unless you're going to track it. Shimmed Wastegate, run away. It's an indication of money. The other one's an indication of spirited driving. The other things to run from, we already covered. If you see rust under that mud flap, surface rust on the rear quarter is okay. It can be fixed relatively cheap. But if you have any rust on this lower inner tub behind the bumper, or if you're missing the rear inner wheel tub, run away. Don't even think about it, just pass. There's a nicer one out there, believe me, it's not for you. I don't even want to know what it would cost to fix that properly. It'd probably make you nauseous. That's something to run away from. And depending on your budget, this last thing could be the rear subframe. Granted, it's not that big of a deal. Basic hand tools, you can replace the subframe, but it's sourcing a good one. Bracing and stitch welding, reinstallation, replacing the subframe bushings, all of this stuff. I mean, you could spend some money here, and if it's beyond your capacity, or maybe you're just tight on budget because your budget was just to acquire the vehicle, pass. How you can tell the subframe is cracked if you hadn't looked, or maybe you did look and you missed it, take it out to a nice road, flat road, smooth road, go up and down the road a few times, get a feel for the car, if it's pulling one way. If it's not pulling one way, if it's driving straight and narrow, great. Put it in second gear at a low roll and just get into it. And if you feel the alignment almost start to change, the car will pull one way, or it'll pull the other way, or feel almost not connected in some way. Like, you'll know what I mean if you feel it. The alignment will change. It will feel weird. Every time I've lost a subframe or damaged or cracked a subframe, it's always felt like the alignment's off when the car's under load. Pay good attention to that. So I'd probably say look for the subframe and do that test while you're doing your test drive. If that's beyond your capability of repair at the time of buying the vehicle, then just pass. You could drive it the way it is, but I mean, it's not recommended. Cracks just get worse. There's an incredible amount of stress in that subframe. It's holding onto that rear diff, especially if you start to drive it spiritedly. That's an area maybe that I would pass on if you know you just couldn't quite make it right. Okay, so now we got a couple things to run from. Basic things to look for. Make sure you're making a good legal purchase. The last things I would say is the common mods you're going to find on these. If you found one that's all factory, great, but not great because then the head gasket's probably never been done, or at least in my experience. You could see an exhaust, obviously an intake, probably a K&N or a Pexi. Unlikely you'll find a bolt-on turbo kit. Most times it's going to be 550cc injectors, Lexus airflow meter, intake, and an exhaust. Boost controller perhaps. And that's about the basics that you find on these vehicles. Nothing's wrong with any of them. I wouldn't bat an eye if it's got, you know, the Lexus airflow meter and the fuel injectors, intake and exhaust and a factory intercooler. I wouldn't bat an eye at that. Just use your best judgment. Chances are, I mean, the majority of these that you look at will be modified in one way or another. But I mean, that's really it. Those are the main things I'd look for. A few things I'd run from. A couple that may be debatable based on your budget, like the rear subframe. Body stuff, rust, isn't cheap. The moldings, again, based on your budget, it's $1,000 if you can handle looking at it the way that it is. If it's got messed up moldings, then fine. That's your discretion. But yeah, hopefully this helped you guys out and you can make a better purchase. Yes, I could have done a more comprehensive buyer's guide, and we can if that's what you want. It's just going to be a lot longer of a video, so I just wanted to make a few key points here. And that's that. If you guys have any other questions, drop them in the comments. I always get back to you guys. Thanks a lot. Catch you guys later. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know you're following along. Thanks, guys.